Hey, GLP-1 plus size community. Before we jump into the podcast, please take the time to leave us a 5-star review on whatever audio platform you're listening to the podcast on. Share your story and how the podcast has helped you. This will help us get referred up in the audio platform so that we can reach more people that need our help, our support, and guidance from our doctors. Help us get loud and change things. Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on the Plus Sides Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to the Plus Sides Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.
"20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise." That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Oh, hey. Hey
Hey,
there.
welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to the Plus Sides.
Special edition.
Post-Thanksgiving, post-turkey.
Yep,
So we are all full and
yep.
happy.
Very
How was
happy.
your Thanksgiving, John?
It was nice and peaceful. I loved it. I laid in my recliner, watched TV, and ate a steak.
That's what dads do
Yes,
on Thanksgiving.
it's the only way to do it. It's the
Only way.
only way to do it.
I made short ribs, so it's a close second, right? So it's
Well, I don't know.
beef, right?
I'd almost go with short ribs over the steak, depending upon how they were seasoned.
Well, I made them, so
Yeah.
I'm good.
Now I would take your short ribs over my steak.
Eh, okay.
I know how you cook. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you all have not already noticed, Kim is missing. She is under the weather, but we have other Kim. Just kidding.
Yep, we have
Kim with the
Vez
beard.
extraordinaire this evening. Kim
They're the
has,
extraordinaire.
yep, grown some facial hair, lost hair on top of her head. So, this is what happens when get sick.
Kids kids do that. So
Yep,
kids will do that
kids
to
do
you.
do that. Yep.
Yep. Well, if you have not joined us before, where you been? You have a lot of material to get through. So we hope you enjoy it as well.
Definitely.
Where you get all your podcasts and all of your audio. My name is Kat Carter on the Tiki Talks, and we talk all about GLP-1s in our community. And then we have our doctors and specialists on board to back all of that up with science, facts, and data.
Yep.
Yep. So
Yep.
I have been on a GLP-1 for 2 years. It's been Mounjaro, like a good Midwesterner would say it,
Mounjaro.
for 2 years. And how long you been on yours, Bear?
I
Extraordinaire.
have been on mine now. I believe we are at 2.5 years. Me and Kim, we started
Mhm.
at roughly the same time, and I've been on all of them, and I believe I am at 75 or 80 pounds lost to date. I'm not too far away from my goal weight, so I'm
Amazing.
pretty excited.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Now
yeah,
I
I'm
just
70 down, but yeah.
Yeah,
That's good. That's a good number.
it is. I'm very happy with it. Even if I stopped losing weight right now, I'm still pretty content
Mhm.
with how I look, how the clothes feel, where all my medical numbers are,
Yep.
blood pressure, cholesterol, everything. So, the healthy parts there, last what, 30 pounds is, I guess,
Mhm.
vanity more than, you know, anything,
Yeah.
I suppose.
And we get to talk all about that too, set weight and all that good stuff with our doctor today. So, well, all right. Well, let's get our community member on. We have someone on today. Let's talk about about her story, and it's Dominique. Let's bring her to the stage. We need sound effects. We need applause.
We do. I'm working on convincing the
Oh,
boss to get me a soundboard.
I can do audio over here. Maybe I'll just get one on my phone and just put the phone on my microphone.
Well,
I'm only kidding. I'm just kidding.
I found one on Amazon for like $50, and I just plug my microphone into it, and it makes all the noises.
Uh oh.
I can even download additional noises.
I
So
think that would be trouble for you, John, because you could
it
get
would
yourself
be.
in trouble. Do you
It
see his
would be.
smirk? He's like, it would be.
Oh yeah. Oh no,
Yeah.
I know me. I'm a starter beyond a reasonable doubt.
Hmm. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, Dominique, welcome to the show. And this is the
Hi.
part where Kim and I go on mute because we're chitty chatters, chatty Cathy's. So, tell your story, unfiltered, uncut,
All
um,
right.
and let her rip. I'm going to go on mute now. Okay.
Okay.
As will I. Lay it
Welcome,
on us.
welcome.
Mhm.
Well, it is a story. I mean, I think my GLP-1 story starts like many in the community. My story starts as a child. I was always active. I was always a dancer. I was in a basketball. I was in a soccer, yet I was always overweight. I've been on every single diet you can think of. I started Weight Watchers when I was 10, after my mom took me to the doctor. Good old night. So I'm a 90s baby. Early 2000s, Britney Spears, where they were coming at Jessica Simpson. If anybody remembers Takara on Top Model, she was like a size 8 and she was considered,
Was she an 8? Yeah, she was 200 pounds, and they said she was just too heavy,
yeah, she was just
right? I
so
remember Takara.
fat.
Takara is beautiful. Yeah.
Right. So I grew up during that time, and the I remember my mom took me to the pediatrician, and they pulled out that BMI chart. They pulled out that BMI chart and just scared her half to death. So she used to take me to the gym 5 o'clock in the morning. She put me on Weight Watchers. And I mean, it definitely impacted me growing up. It definitely impacted my confidence, but I try not to blame her because she was literally just doing her best. And she was just, scared because of what the doctors told her. They scared her. They were like, she's going to get diabetes and just be so overweight and looking back on it, I wasn't even that big. I was like a size 10, 12. But I'm also a taller girl, bigger build. So that BMI chart just was not for me. So I've had those weight problems all the way up until I got to college. When I graduated college, I went through a really, really bad breakup and just dedicated myself to the gym. And I also went vegan for 3 years and I ended up losing 75 pounds. So I was 300 pounds and then lost 75 pounds and was vegan for 3 years and was solely dedicated to the gym. Very unhealthy, completely ruined my metabolism, but I was actually able to keep that weight off for a really long time until I got to my upper 20s. I didn't want to be a vegan anymore because I like chicken, like most people do. Um, so, uh, but then the weight started to slowly creep back, slowly creep back. I got married, more weight crept in. Then I had my son, and then I just blew up. So I had my son when I was 28 and got all the way up to 320 pounds. Struggled for like a year after I had him. And then in 2022, I got on TikTok And that's when I came across Ozempic and Mounjaro. I started on Ozempic because I had no idea what Mounjaro was, and I was one of the skeptics. I didn't know what that was. I didn't hear about. I didn't know Mounjaro. It sounded weird. I was like, I don't know about that, but I do know Ozempic because I remember the commercial. So I was like, okay, I'll try Ozempic. I'll see. I'll let them do the Mounjaro, but I'll try the Ozempic. Um, so I went to the doctor. I got a prescription for Ozempic, and I was actually getting mine from Canada because my insurance didn't cover it. So I got mine from Canada. This is when you were allowed to do that before it like became a craze. Got mine from Canada. I started and I was on it for 4 months, lost 39 pounds, and then got pregnant. So I am one of the girlies who had an Ozempic baby. That is a real thing. So I ended up so I had to stop because I was pregnant. And I ended up stopping for a year. And then after I had my baby in 2024, in February of 2024, I nursed for about 3 months. And then in February of 2024, I wanted to get back on it. But instead of Ozempic, I went with Zepbound because by this time you weren't allowed to get Ozempic from Canada anymore. And I certainly couldn't foot the $1,300 to buy it out of pocket here in the States, and my insurance still won't cover it because it's obesity, and it doesn't cover any obesity. So I couldn't get Wegovy, none of that. So I opted for Zepbound. I was doing the coupon for a little bit, and then the shortages hit in the summer. Those shortages in the summer, I mean, it's still in shortage now. FDA, it's still in shortage now, but the summer shortages were just insane. Like, and I just felt crazy calling all the pharmacies, doing all the things. And I was like, why am I doing this when I can literally just get compound and not have to worry about it? So I've been on compound tirzepatide since I believe July, and I am currently 65 pounds down. So that is my story of how I got on GLP.
Woo! See, and I didn't interrupt. Well, I kind of did a little bit about Takara, but
I mean, small, small.
small.
It wasn't bad. I thought that that was a great story. Definitely rings very
Hmm.
similar to kind of like what
Hmm.
my wife's been through, what I've heard a lot of people. So it's always great. For
Hmm.
I'm sorry, it's always great to hear similarities in things. At
Yeah.
least to me, it
Mhm.
makes it feel a little bit more, I don't know, consistent, kind of normal in a way,
Hmm.
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
that's the thing that I love about the GLP-1 community. And I think that's why everybody in the GLP-1 community is like so connected because most people who are on GLP-1s didn't just start having weight problems. It's been a
Agreed.
lifelong thing.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
so we all
That's
have similar struggles. We all have like similar backgrounds, like we all have things that connect us despite
true.
all of our different walks of life. We know what it's like to live in a bigger body when it's not always accepted, and
Hmm.
we
Yep.
know what it's like to literally try everything.
Everything. All the things,
All the
everything,
things. Keto,
everything.
carnivore, whole 30, vegan. I mean, everything.
Vegan sounds difficult.
It
Like
was.
a lot of chickpeas, right?
Lots of chickpeas, lots of veggies. It was definitely hard. It was hard, but I really wanted to be skinny. So
I've known 2 people who have done, vegan for the purpose of the losing weight. Now one of them, she swore up and down to me that her doctor told her that everything, like she was the healthiest she had ever been while she was vegan. Now I saw, like, looking at her observationally, she looked skinnier because she was losing the weight,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
she also looked paler. her
Mhm.
skin, she did not look good at all
Hmm.
as far as like compared to what I was used to seeing with her.
Mhm.
And then the other one was a gentleman that I knew, and he went on. I can't remember exactly how they referred to the diet, but it was basically he ate a ton of like Brussels sprouts,
Mhm.
cauliflower, things along those lines, and he lost a ton of weight as well. But getting through that gastral thing,
That's
because
immediately what I thought of. Yeah.
because like that was all he ate, so it was like my guy.
Yeah.
Some gas X is necessary
Yeah.
here, and but
Yeah. But Oreos are vegan too. You can get
yeah,
your junk food in.
yeah,
This
you
is
can.
very true. Like, you can be
Absolutely.
an unhealthy vegan. I feel like it got really popular because of all the documentaries and stuff that was happening, so
Yeah.
that's, like, where I
True.
got a lot of my information instead of, like, the doctor,
Yeah.
or, like, a nutritionist. I was just like, "This documentary told me that meat is bad, so I'm going with that."
Understand. Like so
I
many.
mean, that makes sense. You hear it often enough, and it kind of comes into your mind like, hey, that something has to be true about that.
Mhm. A
You
little
know,
bit. Yeah.
I've definitely thought of it before, but the idea of turning down a steak, I can't do it.
Listen,
Yeah.
I don't know if
it's
either one of you have ever seen The Ranch on Netflix. There's a uh, there's a scene. Sam Elliott is the father, and he's in to see this this just regular doctor, and she's kind of talking to him about his heart health, and she's like, you got to cut out whiskey and red meat, and then she's like, what do you do to reduce stress? And he's like, drink whiskey and eat steak, and I'm like, yes, right there, my spirit animal on
Oh
television.
Lord.
Food has definitely been a very dominant voice in my head. That's not the main focus anymore. Dieting, exercising, and adding GLP-1s through Row is a game changer. I have such a sense of mental freedom since I started with Row. Food no longer controls my thoughts. Family time used to revolve around food, and now it revolves around what we're gonna go do together.
Well, they say like, bison might be a little bit healthier or maybe venison,
Oh, yeah.
game meats, but
Oh, I love bison. Bison
okay.
is it's the closest texture and kind of taste wise to just red meat for most people.
Mm.
It really is. It's one of the, at least in my opinion, it's one of the best transition meats for people who don't want to
Mhm.
eat red meat, but they still want meat. It's like, hey, start with bison.
That'll be kind of, yeah, technically still red meat. But anyway,
Yep. Okay.
let's let's not talk about meat. Well, we do have to, we got to keep our protein up. Speaking of meat, right? I'm just
It's
kidding.
very
Yeah,
true.
yeah. You got to keep your protein up, meat and
But
cheese.
we're gonna bring
Mhm.
our doctor up as well, Dr. Marilyn Galindo. We've talked to her before, and I was so excited to see you again.
Hi, yes, thanks
You
for
look
having
great.
me again. Thank you. So I'm Dr. Galindo. I have been a hospitalist for 10 years, and
Oh,
basically what that means is I was working in the hospital full time, but as somebody who suffers from obesity themselves and has
yes.
struggled with the same things that you guys have been talking about, I started doing obesity medicine in the last 2 years, and I have a small micro practice. So I work in the hospital one week, and then on my weeks off, I do obesity medicine here in Texas. So that's kind of how I got involved in this. But one of my
Yeah.
passions is treating people in the hospital for their obesity, because I feel like those patients tend to be very sick and like
Mhm.
to the point, and we're talking about patients who weigh like 600 pounds and things like that. And so a lot of times they can't move, they can't get out of the hospital, and they'll be in the hospital for like 6 months. And before GLPs, we used to think of those patients as like, okay, well, they're just stuck in the hospital. Like, but now I'm like, no, we're going to treat them. So that's kind of one of the things I've been working on this year is like changing my colleagues' perception of like, obesity and being a disease like diabetes,
Mhm.
not just something that we can tell the patient like diet and exercise. I mean, just imagine telling a patient that weighs 600 pounds that he needs to diet and exercise. Like,
You're immobile at that point,
exactly. And
Mhm.
you're stuck, right? So that's kind of where a lot of my passion for treating obesity comes from.
So when you say, and excuse me for any ignorance on my part, when you say a hospitalist, um, uh, it do you kind of do just the general medicine and then obesity specialists, and you just do it for people who are already admitted to the hospital, or if
Oh,
you don't
yeah,
mind?
I can explain that. So a hospitalist is like when you get really sick and you have to be admitted to the hospital. I always like to say the hospitals is like your PCP in the hospital. Like we coordinate the care of the patients. And so I did that for 10 years full time until I had my kids. And then I kind of was looking for part time things to do outside of that because it's a rough life being a hospitalist. You work 12-hour shifts and things like that. And that's how I found obesity medicine. And I really love it. I'm just not at a point where I can do it like full time. But
Yeah.
I also realized like it was so important for me to do it in the hospital because these are patients that already have so many medical problems. Like they have really severe sleep apnea, right? Where they're like hooked up to a BiPAP because they can't breathe.
Hmm.
These are patients that have diabetes sometimes, but not always. Sometimes you don't have to have diabetes, I mean, obesity and diabetes. A lot of patients don't have diabetes, but they have insulin resistance. And so I've decided that instead of like just doing outpatient only, that I wanted to stay inpatient because I also wanted to have an impact on patients. And one of my biggest success stories is that I had a patient who lost in 2 months, he lost almost 80 pounds in the hospital, and he was able to leave the hospital because of that.
That's
That
Yeah.
is
wonderful.
awesome.
Yeah. So I didn't want to leave that because like and then I'm like working on some projects to try to make sure that when people go to the hospital if they have obesity, we hook them up with a obesity specialist when they leave and like so that's so one of the reason I like I'm actually a very shy person, but one of the reasons I like doing the social media is because I feel like there's so much misinformation around obesity, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
there's people just have these ideas that people with obesity are lazy, that they don't try, but that's so wrong. Like most of my patients have tried everything. They just can't get it to work because it's more complicated than just like, oh, eating right all the time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So,
Totally. You touched on insulin resistance, and we always ask this mandatory question every episode until it gets drilled into everybody's head.
mhm.
Um, can we examine insulin resistance and why it affects so many obesity patients, and how does it relate to PCOS as well?
Okay, so obesity is like a spectrum too, right? Because one
Hmm.
thing that I've seen, and just like insulin resistance, like if you have really bad insulin resistance, you probably have diabetes as well, because now you can't metabolize sugar well at all, right? But then there's people who have insulin resistance and might just have obesity without diabetes, but they still have very high levels of insulin in their bodies. And actually, insulin promotes weight gain because what happens is your cells need to like process sugar in order to function. And when you have insulin resistance, the sugar doesn't it's insulin is like the key, right? And if
Hmm.
it's not working properly, then your body is like basically starving. And so I think that's also what makes a lot of people hungry when they have insulin resistant is because you have that it's you have
Yeah.
that impairment in your metabolism where you can't get the sugar where it needs to be, so you're always feeling hungry, right? And so and then that's another reason why people who have diabetes and go on insulin gain weight because the more we just gave them more insulin, now their body's like more hungry. You get what I'm saying? So it's a very
Mhm.
complicated disease when it comes to insulin resistant, and it definitely contributes to obesity.
So, just out of curiosity, in reference to what you were saying with people who are on insulin and then they go on a GLP-1 like
Hmm.
Mounjaro or Ozempic or Wegovy, how quickly, out of curiosity, from going on one of the GLP-1s, are they able to either reduce the amount of insulin that they're taking or maybe the dependency on the insulin?
So usually within a few weeks, I start to notice a difference. And like usually we check an hemoglobin A1C every 3 months because
Hmm.
hemoglobin A1C measures the sugar around your red blood cell, and the life cycle of a red blood cell is 3 months. So if we check every 3 months, you usually see a big drop in your A1C if you have diabetes. But I even see drops in people who don't have diabetes. So like I'll have a lot of patients who start off with like an A1C of 5.5 or 5.6, which is like pre-diabetes. And then 3 or 4 months later, when we check again, we're seeing like an A1C of 5, for instance. So you start to see the effects pretty quickly. So the way that a GLP works is that it does two things. It makes your cells more sensitive to the insulin so that you need less of it, but it also triggers your pancreas to make more insulin. So by
Okay.
making you, so over time, once it kind of fixes that metabolic dysregulation that people with obesity have, because that's what it is. It's a metabolic dysregulation and it's a neural hormonal disease. So your hormones don't work the same in your brain and in your gut as somebody who doesn't have obesity. So when we give you a medication to fix that,
Yeah.
you get better.
A neurohormonal disease. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I like that as opposed to just
Being chronic, right?
the metabolic. I
Mhm.
like the neuro part because so much like as somebody who's been on all of them,
Mhm.
one of the first things that I noticed like Kim and Kat, you
Mhm.
guys mentioned the food noise. One of the first things I noticed as an autistic person is I noticed the general quieting in my mind
Mhm.
of just everything. Not just the food noise, but just the normal noise that I have in my head quieted because it's there's something in there, like you said, Dr. Galindo, or like you referenced, I should say, where it's just it affects something in my brain. There's some change that that appetite change and
Mhm.
that hormone
Mhm.
change, it changes something that up there, at least for me, very
Mhm.
noticeably.
Yeah,
So
and I just got back from Obesity Week. It happened to be in my town, San Antonio, so I went
Oh,
to it.
cool.
And it was amazing because that's how they described it. They said obesity is a neurohormonal disease. It's a disease of this dysfunction from the hormones in your gut, which are what the GLP medications are. Those hormones are made in your gut naturally. They've just been re-engineered so that they last longer, right? And so they also go to these receptors in your brain. And so that's why people have noticed, like you said, that quieting of the food noise, right? Or just
mhm.
like less anxiety too. Yeah.
Less obsession. I always like it less
Mhm.
obsession for me.
Yeah,
Um, you mentioned John, you got me on this. I don't know if you feel comfortable answering this. So on the spectrum of autism,
yeah.
Mhm.
does that affect do you find that that might affect with obesity rates as well? Or let's
Yes.
say, um, would a GLP-1 also is there anything different that a GLP-1 would do for, like, say, a person who's on the spectrum or not, or just works the same? And I'm walking in circles on this, and I'm trying to get to the whole entire point here. Um, like food fixation and things like that, because I know it's a sensory thing, right? And you
Yeah.
get this food obsession, so we can't really deviate from other things with people who are kind of on the spectrum. Does a GLP-1 also help that as well? Or
I think it
does
does
it?
because I think all of that, how your brain processes things, right, is different when you are on the spectrum or when you have
Mhm,
ADHD. And one thing that I've realized is like I started treating a lot of ADHD in my clinic, and it was
mhm,
because patients who have obesity also have ADHD or autism disorder. Like
right.
they're very much related, and it's because your brain functions very differently, right? And so when you give somebody a medication that can kind of quiet some of that down, it really helps patients. But yeah, a lot of my patients are on ADHD meds as well as anti-obesity medication.
Yeah, and it does. It I wouldn't say that it's affected like texture stuff, but what it's allowed me to do because like Dr. Galindo said with the anxiety and just the quieting the noise that we have in our mind in regards to
Mhm,
fixation, it allows you to at least, even if you don't like the texture, maybe to at least finish what you started. And then maybe the next time you go to that same food, because
mhm,
you kind of have to in certain instances, like you change what you want to eat,
Hmm.
or it naturally happens, or at least it did for me. So like certain textures of food prior to being on GLP-1, I couldn't handle at all. But because the GLP-1 allowed me to not have as much anxiety and noise in my head, I
Hmm.
was able to work through what I was attempting to eat a
Hmm.
little bit more. I wouldn't say it's like I wouldn't say it fixes it 100%.
Right.
Like there's still certain things and certain sensory things that I'm not going to be able to get past, but
Mhm.
it's not as bad as it was
Okay.
because there is something with the hormone receptors in the brain. There's something with what happens with that change, with that not with the change, but with the
Hmm.
hormones staying longer. There's something with that that almost straightens the road out
Hmm.
for how my brain is processing and thinking about what I'm doing or what I'm eating, if that makes sense.
It
No, that
does.
makes a lot of sense.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that is possible. I'm sure there's probably studies being done on that currently.
Oh yeah, there's definitely
You know.
studies. I mean, I went to several talks during Obesity Week about that whole correlation between ADHD, autism spectrum disorder. Um, yeah, so there's definitely a lot of research going on in those areas. And one of the things that was really cool about the conference is I realized how many people are so excited about obesity now. Now that we've discovered these meds, they were really a game changer because it made people realize like, oh, wait a minute, we were wrong about this. Like this
Hmm.
isn't just eat less calories, exercise more. It's much more complicated than that. And so there's, I think, like 30 or 100 drugs out there that are being studied. So it's a very exciting time. I always tell my patients, if we don't have a medicine for you that works now, we will in a few years. Like it's coming. So
I
I'm
bet
very
that makes that's really exciting. I bet that makes a lot of us, a lot of you all in the medical profession feel empowered, probably more so than we used to. I know that we're definitely always, of course, fighting the bias of obesity in healthcare, but I think a lot of times now, a lot of our practitioners now feel more empowered, maybe more hopeful.
Mhm.
Besides, because I know we were kind of hopeless too, like the patients, but um, I think there's hope now. Like,
Yes,
there's a lot of things on the
and
horizon.
the other thing is that, like, it's not just, I'm a specialist, but there's a lot of really what they said at the conference was like, it's going to take all of us to fight obesity because so many people are affected by like 40% of the population in the US has clinical obesity. And
Mhm.
so it's not just good, it's going to start with your primary care doctor, but your gynecologist is going to be able to treat it. Like all of these
Mhm.
primary specialists, your pediatricians, all of these people need to get involved. And that's what I told my colleagues in the hospitals. Like, we kind of have to get involved now. Like, if our patients are this sick and obesity is one of their medical problems, we can't ignore it. Because when you treat obesity, you treat so many of their other medical problems as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
20 seconds a week to lose 20% of your weight in a year with diet and exercise. That's the power of GLP-1s through Ro. Ro helps find the medication that's right for you, based on cost, availability, and your weight loss goals. Losing weight with GLP-1s is possible through Ro.
Are you interested in understanding GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro? Then join us on The Plus Side, Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Side's podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and Mounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to The Plus Side's Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.